Hi, I'm Catherine,
I'm Teresa.
and we are the co-authors of the book Pass the Baton, Empowering All Music Students.
Our goal is to share stories of educators who are passing the baton and empowering their music students. We want to help teachers create music lessons that transform students from passive consumers to vibrant creatives. Well, welcome back. Thanks for being here. We're joined tonight by Matt Schaeffer. I had the pleasure of seeing a presentation that Matt did with our previous guest, Marissa Gariello, at the NAFME Eastern Division Conference a couple weeks ago, and was just really impressed by their work in the creativity and improvisation realm. Matt, can you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background and your teaching situation.
Hi, I'm Matt Schaeffer. I teach middle school orchestra in State College, Pennsylvania. I teach two middle schools, 6th through 8th grade students. We have lessons throughout the day, pull-out lessons, and then a couple of rehearsals. I also co-run the drama club program at the one middle school. So that's pretty much what I'm doing for teaching. I got my undergrad at Penn State, and then I got a master's in music at Lebanon Valley College. Which was really cool because their program takes a lot of, you can kind of follow your own path. So I took a lot of different sorts of courses there, and they were over the summer. So I got a lot of really cool experience from that program. I'm a cello player. That's my main instrument, but now I play, obviously, all the string instruments that I need to at a middle school level. And some of my background, how I got started in some of this creative stuff, I played in a band in high school. A couple of my friends and I like to jam out. We would play Damien Rice and Dashboard, like any kind of music, all sorts of stuff, Marshall Tucker band. And we would just go to my friend's basement and just figure it out. He played guitar, and my friend played violin, and I played cello, and I would pick up the bass line and stuff. We'd play at coffee shops, and that was my way of practicing without really practicing. And I didn't realize that until later in life, but that's really what kind of drove me to thinking about doing creative activities, and it kind of really shaped myself as a musician. So that was pretty cool.
That is cool.
Hey, you're also an author, is that right?
Also co-wrote this book with Sarah and Marissa called the Creative String Orchestra. Sarah roped me into that one, and I cover the middle school portion, some activities that I do in my class, and some ideas for how to implement creativity into the string classroom, which is not a place that you often see creativity. Often in the string world, we're often in a box of rehearse this music, perform this concert, and so we like to think outside that box and do some different things to reach all of our students and to reach all of those standards that we should be checking off every day as well.
Yeah, and I think a lot of ensembles find themselves in that box, and that's why, even as a band person, I really enjoyed your session because I felt like it applied to all of us. So
it's definitely everywhere, and it's a problem that we fall into sometimes in ensembles.
Yes. Well, now you're going to tell us how to fix it.
Yeah. Yep.
So as an advocate for improvisation and creativity in your ensembles, can you tell us more about that and some of the things that you've done with your students?
Sure. The big thing that I started with, I called the Pop Project. And this was, it was born out of sort of a necessity. I needed to fill some time during our PSSAs, which is our state standardized testing. I found we were hitting kind of a slump with our rehearsal. If you teach ensemble, you get your music to a point, and then all of a sudden nobody wants to play it anymore, and you get that dip. And for us, it's around April, which is the same time as state testing. So I thought of, what do I want? How do I want to reach my kids? What do I want to do? And I came up with this Pop Project that kind of goes back to my coffee shop band days, where I wanted the kids to realize that they don't just have to play the music I hand them. They listen to songs on the radio. Then I don't think they had Spotify, but YouTube, whatever they were listening to. I guess they still had CDs when I started teaching. They were listening, whatever music they were listening to, I wanted them to realize they could play that. They didn't just have to play the stuff I gave them in class, like I said. So what we did is we set out to just learn a song and arrange it and perform it. So I kind of put it all on them at first. And as I developed the project throughout the years, I kind of gave them some more structure to build up towards it. But at the beginning, it was literally just go listen to the song a whole bunch of times and figure out how you want to play it. And the kids worked in their own groups. They chose them for the most part. So some of them were all the same instrument, a couple of violins together. Some of them would have been different instruments together. And it was really neat just to see them go. It was really scary at first, and I can talk more about that a little bit later. But just to kind of turn it over to them was neat. And I saw some really cool stuff. And right away, they started working on harmonies and what are we going to do here? How do we want this to sound? Who do we want to play this part? Some groups, everybody just played the melody, and that was their choice, and that was cool too. Some groups had these dense parts. I remember one early time in the project, a kid wanted to play the drum set, and I said, "Do you play the drum set?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Okay, let's stick with something you have. I don't know if the band teacher wants me to have you just play the drum set." So he went and grabbed a recycling bin and ended up playing some percussion on a recycling bin, and it ended up being a really cool sound. It was hard. I wanted to encourage their creative choices without being impractical. So we developed it together. And then when I was in my grad school at LVC, I had a chance to study in London one summer, a musical futures program, and some of the schools over there were doing projects that were similar to this in a general music setting, except they went to the next level, and they would just hand a kid a guitar, hand a kid a drum set that had never played it before, and then said, figure these songs out, learn it. And some of these schools we went to were crazy. They had recording studios and all this wild stuff. But it was cool to see what I was doing in my school. And then there was a textbook for the class, and all this stuff was like backed with research. And I was like, oh, this is kind of neat. And so I kind of filled in from the back end of that through that grad course, which was really awesome. So that's kind of where I started. And then I went to a PMEA summer session up here at State College, and it was a composer named Martin Norgard, and he had a piece that had an improv section, and I played an electric cello at this session. I remember it was white. It was really cool. And I was like, this piece is so cool. And I brought it to my students, and they were like, we're not going to improvise. They looked at me like I was crazy. And I was crazy because I didn't really have much of a background in improvisation. I did take a class at Penn State, jazz improv class, but
I took that class too.
With Ken Yoder. It did not go well for me as a string player. And that kind of scared me for improv. But I said, let's try it together. And we kind of worked it out. We did a lot of warm-up exercises where kids would just improvise. I would play a rhythm. I would make all the first violins come up with their own rhythm and then share them, and the whole orchestra would listen to it, play it back. Just literally 4 notes or 4 beats or whatever. We started small and built up. And all of a sudden, everybody was much more comfortable doing it, and then they improvised in the piece. That led to me wanting to do more. There's not very much string repertoire that has improv in it. So I actually commissioned a piece that had an improv section. It's called Grand Central by Rick Hirsch. It's available. It's actually an editor's choice piece, which is really cool on Shaffer. And we took it to an adjudication festival, which was terrifying. That was the next outside the box step. We premiered it actually at adjudication for the judge was the person I student taught with. So that was a whole nother level of scary. And I had kids improvise for the judges, and it went awesome. And the judges were like, that was a new thing that we've never seen a group do at an adjudication. And then I met Sarah at PMEA, and she was doing that on a grand scale. Her kids were improvising. I don't know if you've already talked to Sarah or not about her stuff, but her kids were improvising, creating songs at their concerts. And that's kind of what she presented about at PMEA when I first met her. She would have a kid play drums and a kid play some guitar chords, and they would, in front of the audience, just make up and create an entire song on the spot. And I thought that was the coolest thing. my students are not ready for that yet, and that which is fine. If I was at the high school level, maybe I would try to tackle some of that, but we're still building the building blocks here at middle school. So it's so cool what she does. So I hope you get a chance to hear from her about that. That was another project I went into, and I do little bits at a time. This is all around concerts, all around preparing for 2 concerts a year. I was still doing the pop project every year, but starting to introduce some of this other stuff. A lot of it is really easy to tackle in warm-ups. Instead of just playing a boring scale, to get everybody loose and together, we can do some of these exercises. And then I talked to the general music teachers, and they were learning guitar, and they had a packet of songs that was really cool. 3-chord songs. Every song is a 3-chord song, right? So I asked if I could have a packet, and we decided to do something similar. And we started talking about chord structures and other things that you don't normally get into in orchestra. And kids, all of a sudden, we were learning Ring of Fire by Johnny Cash. We would look at the chords, look at what notes were in the chords. Kids would get to choose which note they wanted to play. It's a really good, even if you just have beginners, you can do a lot of open strings, a lot of things like that, or just simple notes, even if you're in a band situation. I will say, I feel like I'm rambling now, but I will say with bands, some of my colleagues tried something similar to the pop project, and they did run into a little issue with transposition. And that is really tricky at the middle school level. And I wonder, again, at the high school level, when kids have more comfort with it, if that would be a little bit more accessible. But she really had some trouble with the kids trying. It was not something she thought about when she started the project. And then when they got into it, it was like, oh, this French horn and this trumpet don't necessarily play the same notes. So that was an interesting thing. Luckily in string world, everybody's in C, so it's easy for us. But we started doing these 3-chord songs where they would lay down I would have either project or write the chord pattern, or they would have their packet from guitar that they already played the songs in guitar. So we're crossing curriculums there. That was pretty cool. And we would just play through these 3-chord songs. They would play the chords. Again, they could choose what note they wanted to play. If they wanted to stay on D the whole time, as long as it was, in the 1 or 5 chord, whatever, they can do that. They can get creative and move around wherever they want. So some kids would go nuts and just play all kinds of different notes when the chord changed. Some kids would try to stay around home base and just play the root. And it really worked well. Every kid could participate and do it. And then we would learn the melody, and then we could put it together. And then all of a sudden, you have a song that you can perform, you can record, do whatever with, that they figured out, they took charge of. And it's different every time. It kind of lives, because kids make different choices every time we go through it on the chord structure. It's really cool. And Ring of Fire is a really good one to do that with, because it's a really simple chord progression. So that's what I had been doing up until this year. And little bits of that, we would do it. The 3-chord song is really easy. Again, a warm up. If you project the song on the board as they come in and write out the chords. So if it's in D, we would write D, F sharp, A, G, oh my gosh, I just blanked, G, B, D, and A, C sharp, E, like a 1, 4, and a 5. And so they can see those chords. They can play around with it as they're getting unpacked, getting seated, and then we could go through the chords together. And it only takes 5 to 10 minutes at the beginning of the rehearsal, and everybody's locked in and ready to go then when it's time for a repertoire. So it's been a pretty cool thing.
Yeah. What I love about it is it sounds like for somebody, and for many of us, when we get started with these kinds of things, my mind always goes to like, well, I can't because I have this and I have this. But what I hear you saying is like you worked it into what you can control, and you can control warm-ups, and you have performances. So why don't you put an improv piece in the performance, right? And so it's kind of worked into what you already have, which is awesome. So it kind of takes away the stress of like, well, when and how. It's just already in your structure.
Yeah, and
That's
with the
cool.
project in particular, it gave the kids something. In 8th grade, the 6th graders would see the 8th graders at the concert. We always would vote on which one we wanted them to do at the concert. And sometimes we would have more than one if some kids really wanted to play theirs. So the 6th graders would see that, and they had no idea what the project was or whatever. And their parents would see and hear that. And we would kind of take a break in the middle of the concert, and we would have the kids down in front of the stage perform their pop projects. And the sixth graders all of a sudden are like, I want to do that. And it gives that hook to keep kids engaged in the class. Kids already come into eighth grade orchestra knowing what song they want to do for their project at the end of the year, knowing what groups they want to be in. They have no idea like how to do it or what it is. They just know that they heard it earlier in the concert. So it really it serves a lot of purposes, and it's a really fun. It's fun for me because it's easier for me. I'm not doing the work; they're doing the work.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Time.
Another nice thing I heard you too is say is you picked for, I think, the rock part, like to do some of it during April when it was like, I got to do something, right? What I'm doing isn't working. Here's a place where, like, oh, I'll just try something new here. And I think, again, we all feel like, well, we have these moving pieces we have to do, but pick that time that's got to change anyways, you know, right before spring break, right before winter break or whatever, where you got to switch it up anyways.
A lot of times the chunk of time after a concert, you know, if you have a concert in early or mid-December and you don't have break until late December, you have 2 weeks that
right.
When I first started teaching, I was like, what do I do here? And I didn't want to start new music and then have them go away. And it's the perfect time to fit in some exercises like that and activities like that to get or like you said, in that doldrum of the rehearsal time, get that reset, do something different to get their minds off of that music. Or when the schedule's crazy for state testing and everything's up in the air anyway, throw something different at them. It's pretty cool.
It's really fun. So you mentioned, and I know you were kind of teasing about how it's easy for you because you're not doing any of the work. And the reason for that, right, is because you're giving that ownership to the students, right? So how have you noticed that transfer of ownership? How has that been impacting your students?
Yeah, so that's one of the harder things to do. I think I mentioned that earlier. At first, that was really hard because I thought, like a lot of people think, what is everybody else in the school going to think when they walk by my classroom? And there are kids everywhere making noise, figuring stuff out. We have an instrument storage room. I have my office. They're on the stage. They're in the hallway. Like, principal walks by. What is he going to think? And that was a big concern of mine for the first 2 years I did the project. And through talking to some other teachers about it and the stuff I did in grad school, it was like, that's the point, is the kids are in charge of this. It sounds like chaos, but it's organized chaos. It's the sound of them learning. It's not just a free for all, even though it might sound like that from the outside. And nobody's ever asked me about it, even though I was so concerned about it. But if your administrator's like, what is happening? It's really easy to say, these kids are doing this themselves. They're figuring this out. They're in charge of this. It's a student-focused learning instead of the conductor standing there waving their arms telling them what to do. Any administrator that's worth their salt should be like, yeah, that's great, right? Now, granted, we don't all have those administrators, but you know, there's a big push right now for everything to be student-led, student-focused, and it's a really good way to do that. So students are more confident in their playing too, in their normal orchestra stuff. When we do stuff like this, it's amazing how students all of a sudden, Johnny, who sits in the middle of the second violins, who never played more than a mezzo piano, maybe, all of a sudden is playing their instrument with a lot more confidence and a lot more gusto because, one, they're practicing a lot more because they're playing these songs they want to play. Two, they're in charge of what they're playing in their group, so they're still figuring out technique and things like that. And I am still going over that with them while they're in their small groups, and it's just a different way of delivering it. But they get a little bit more focused attention than if they're in a whole section in the orchestra rehearsal. If I can go and spend 10 minutes with a group of 5 kids that's working on their own song over here, I can give that closer attention to them, and then it shows dividends in the ensemble. It's affected my ensembles in a positive way. Kids play out, kids have confidence. Students are doing it on their own. That's the other cool thing I've noticed, and I'll talk a little bit about what I did this year that's different. particularly with this, but students, and that was my goal, was what songs do you listen to? What do you want to play at home? They're doing that. They're figuring out songs on their own and coming in, hey, Mr. Schaeffer, check out what I figured out this week, and playing those songs. Kids are composing their own stuff in Note Flight and not even necessarily sharing it with me. I stumbled across a kid. I have a study hall, and one of my orchestra students is in it. I don't know how an orchestra student has study hall, but that's a whole nother story. But he was on Note Flight, and I was like, hey, are you working on your project? And he was like, no. And he kind of hid his computer a little bit. And he was working on a violin duet for him and his brother that was totally unrelated to what we were doing. But because of the tools and the things that he learned about composing and what we were doing in orchestra, he was kind of doing it on his own. Another girl who, again, she was an average bass player, would never play out, would never be the kind to volunteer herself to play at something. She ended up writing a bass piece for her English class. They had a project. They were reading I Am Malala, and they had to come up with some sort of creative project. I don't know. And her choice for her presentation was she wanted to narrate the book with her songs on her bass that she wrote. So there's, I guess, 3 sections of the book, and she made 3 different melodies that matched the section. So it was really cool. The English teacher was blown away because it showed that she really understood the book. Each part of her melody had something to do with what she read. And again, she totally did that on her own. And I found out from her English teacher later, and I was like, can you please play that for me? That's so cool. But so kids are doing that stuff now on their own for other stuff, which is, that's what makes me happy. And that's the kind of thing that makes me really excited about it.
Yeah.
On top of it for the project.
And that's the stuff they're going to remember too, right? I mean, we hope they remember all of the wonderful things we teach them, and we, all of that, but like those projects where they really put themselves into it, they're going to remember that.
Mhm.
Yeah, the English project one was really cool. That really,
Mhm.
I was annoyed that she didn't tell me, but then it was almost better because then it wasn't like I suggested it to her. That was a really cool one.
So let's see, and what advice would you give someone if they were new to improvisation, in their ensemble, but they want to get started?
Start small, but just start. It's the hardest thing is to jump into the pool and do it. I didn't want to improvise either. So I would start by every class at the beginning. I don't actually even do this anymore, but at the beginning, I would always model some improvisations. A very easy thing to do that I did was if we're doing something in the key of D, I would say we're picking only notes from the D string. I would play something for them, D, even just open D. You can do this with beginners all the way through. And I would just play a rhythmic pattern, and they would listen to it, and I would play it again, and then I would just make it up. I would improvise. And that would get me more confident as the teacher with improvisation. And it gets them good at listening and figuring it out. And eventually I turned that over to them to, okay, first violin, first chair, first violin. Now you provide the 4-beat pattern that we're doing. And then we would just go around. But it started with me getting comfortable with it myself. And so that's an important thing to do, is just to know, just put yourself out there. The kids don't know that you don't know. No, right? So, and if you play it and you're confident in it, and they'll buy in, they'll follow you. Find backing tracks. That was a really helpful thing. YouTube is a great resource for us. There's all kinds of, I'm on a big D major kick today, apparently, but we're doing a D major backing track. Actually, this concert that I have coming up tomorrow, my 6th graders wrote 8-measure compositions. We were doing a pentatonic scale. Each kid wrote their own D major pentatonic composition. I found a backing track that was on YouTube. It's like a pop rock backing track, and I'm having 10 of them. They're just going to perform them back to back to back to back. So they're creating their own song. It's not improvising, obviously it's composing, but it'll be a never before heard, never before performed piece that is, each kid is performing 8 measures of it as we go around. And they have the backing track, they're practicing on their own. And that's pretty cool. So backing tracks are really helpful because it helps you, keeps you focused with your pitch and your key and all of that. Pentatonic scales are your friend for this, for improvising, because there's less chance you can make a mistake, which is why I definitely, and I hate to use, I don't even use the word mistake. I don't, if kids mess up while they're playing, when we're improvising, we just, and it took a little while to get to this point because, you know, they get bashful, but we just keep going. So if we're going around and I'm having kids improvise 4 beats or whatever, a kid freezes, a kid fumbles over their notes, we just treat it the same as if they played it perfect. And that's made a difference too, because then they're not afraid. And I'll give them a chance at the end if they want to try it again. And a lot of times they do, and a lot of times they don't. But the next class, they'll try it again. And the next class, they'll get it. So I don't make too big of a deal with improv about successes or failures. I think that's important. Because first of all, is there a wrong answer? That's a whole discussion we don't have time for probably here, but you know, so there's that. But also it just, there's no reason to build or wreck their confidence when we're doing it. It's really a tool that we're using to help build them up in their skills of their orchestra. So you have to set that culture in your classroom. That's really important too. And it took a while for me to get there, and I'm still working on it as we go. And it is scary for kids but if they don't know any different, then it's not scary. So I start my 6th graders pretty much day one. Before I hand them sheet music, we start doing these exercises and improv activities and things. And then that's just the norm for them in the class. They haven't been in another middle school orchestra necessarily. They haven't taken the classes that we've taken or have the experience. That was hard for me as a teacher to get past. Like, I didn't do this in my middle school orchestra.
Right.
Different than any orchestra thing that I ever did, but the kids don't know that. And if you set that culture and you set that from day one, they'll do it. So just set expectations and be consistent with them. And it's something you can definitely do in your ensembles.
All right. So you've said a couple times that this year has been a little different, which we are well aware of. Anything that you tried this year or learned this year that you'll continue to do in future years, or what have you taken from it?
Yeah, we dove a lot more into the composition side of things this year. At the beginning of the year, I was like, how are we going to do things over Zoom and Google Meet? We have a hybrid model. So 1/3 of the students are in person any given day, 1/3 are fully remote, and 1/3 are remote when they're not in school. So it's A through L and M through Z. So really 2/3 of my kids are on the computer at any given time and 1/3 in person. Well, what are we going to do with this? So we've been trying to rehearse over the thing. Everybody's working on their own kind of, but I thought it was the perfect opportunity to kind of try some new stuff. So composition it was. So we did a lot with Note Flight, and we actually did a really cool presentation with Note Flight a couple of months ago. Back in the winter, Note Flight had us on to talk about this stuff. It was really, really neat, and they gave us access to some tools that were really cool. That I was just using the free Note Flight for every kid, and that's all it takes to get started. We didn't have Note Flight Premiere or anything like that, and then I got the keys to the castle, and now I want the school to pay for some of that, but we'll see how that goes. But everything I did, we can do with the free Note Flight, and just getting them used to that at the beginning of the year made a big difference. And now my 6th graders know how to use it. It's really user friendly. I'm not getting paid by Note Flight to say any of this, but it's been a great tool because it takes things to the next level. So they're creating their music, they're thinking things out when we play in rehearsal every day. But now we're talking about notation, and now we're talking about making even more connections to the music they read every day. So we started, this is for my 7th and 8th grade, we started with just a basic 8-measure pentatonic composition. I used a website called Rhythm Randomizer, which is amazing if you guys don't know about it. Rhythm Randomizer is so cool. It just creates random rhythms. You can set 2, 4, 8, think 16 measures. And you can set whatever kind of notes you want in there, complex or simple. And so they started with a simple one just to get used to it. We did a composition or an arrangement project in the winter. My coworker, the band teacher, had a packet of like winter songs. So we took that, I stole that from her. I steal a lot from other people. All my good ideas are from other people's other good ideas, and I just make them work for me. And we did an arrangement. So the kids entered, again, more practice with note flight. They entered the melody into their note flight. Let's say they did Silent Night. We took the flute book, and then they would enter it in, and if it was a cello or a viola, they would change, or a bass, they would change it to their clef, which again, super easy to do through that program. And then we talked about chord structure, and they wrote basically with 1, 4, 5 chords, they wrote a harmony for the given melody. Then we did both, just a short composition where they had to write the melody and the harmony. I gave them a rhythm for that, I think, to kind of control one of the variables. So they had a rhythm, they had a key that was assigned to them. I think that was D pentatonic, because string teacher, so D. And that was D major, not pentatonic, sorry, the first one was pentatonic. And so then I took away some of that structure, but again, short 8-measure composition, and I had them perform, they had to perform each of these for me as well. So they would make a Flipgrid video and send it in, or Canvas. We ended up using Canvas once I got more comfortable with it. We started with that this year as well. So another new thing to learn in the middle of all this. And so that they've now done 3 things. They did a short, just melody. They wrote a harmony to a given melody, and now they were sort of writing both. And we just finished with our final composition, which was a 16 to 32 measure composition where I gave them nothing. They just started from scratch, and they were writing a duet. And most kids chose to write it for the same instrument they played. They had to write one of the lines for their instrument. Some kids chose to write it for mixed instruments, and I just sent them over to Marissa, whose high school students are recording them for us, because a lot of them are too complicated for my kids to play. For the first 3, my kids performed them and submitted them. Mm-hmm. We used a program called Cyborg Llama for the winter duets, which kind of is like a video editing thing that puts it. So they were playing it was a video duet with themselves. The other 2 were just audio. Because again, it's like way more variables, more programs to learn, things that we didn't need to mess with. Just record yourself and send it. Yeah. But so Marissa's students are recording, hopefully this week, my students' composition, so that they have a professional recording of it. I was going to use Penn State students, but they're gone, so right. I didn't really think that out with the timing. But that's one of the nice things about having a university in my backyard, is I can use those resources. So the kids are going to have a finished product recording of their duet that they wrote, and we're going to include some of those in the concert. So we're going to talk about how we learned about composition, and a few of those performances will be in there, with some interviews with kids about what did you learn about composing, what was cool, what was hard, and that'll be a neat addition to our concert video next week.
That's awesome.
So I'm going to keep that. I'm going to have to modify that, because we spent a lot more time on that. We normally prepare for 2 concerts. This year we only have the 1. I think we're doing, my 7th and 8th grade orchestra is playing 4 pieces total this whole year. Yeah. Normally we would do 4 or 5 for each concert. So once we go back to whatever normal is, I'm gonna have to figure out timing, how that works. But I would definitely like to keep, and it may end up being something like I split it up among 7th and 8th grade, whereas 7th and 8th graders all did all of it this year. So maybe the first piece we do at the beginning of 7th grade, the short composition, and then the second piece, and then by the end of 8th grade they're doing the full composition. We'll see. I don't know. And the 6th grade composition thing, I'm definitely going to keep that. Because we can change the backing track every year. We can change all kinds of things, and we can do that live in a live concert, where they just say, you play your composition. So we're definitely going to keep that, because that's a cool, different thing. I don't have a ton of time with my 6th graders. That's always been something that's bothered me. I think I see them like 8 times before our winter concert, and they play 2 pieces, both with the older kids. And then in the spring, they play 1 on their own and then 2 with the 7th and 8th graders. This just gives them a little bit more to do, and I think it fills in kind of a piece that's been missing without taking time away from the other stuff. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I really like how everything you described, just you're letting them be creative within parameters and then very gradually backing away from some of those parameters. I think you're setting them up for success in a really nice way.
Yeah, I mean, I learned that the hard way. First, it was like, and that didn't work. So then I had to back up as the teacher and figure out what structures, what scaffolding do they need. I don't know if that's a term that we use in education anymore. But what do they need as support, and what can I pull away as we go? And that takes trial and error. I mean, this stuff doesn't happen overnight. This is my 13th year here in the district, and I've been doing something creative since year 1, but it's never been the same thing. And every year it develops and changes, and I figure out what works and what doesn't. And the kids are still successful and they're still learning, and so am I. And it's been cool to kind of get to where I am now. Now I feel pretty comfortable with it after 13 years of doing it. So going back to what you asked me earlier about what advice, just start it and try it. And if it doesn't work, try it in a different way. Try it. Take a look at yourself. Take a look at what are you comfortable with? What can you try that's different? What support? What structure? Lean on your education that you have. Music theory is not one of my strengths, but I understand a 1 and 4 and 5 chord for sure, and I can talk about even a 2 chord. How does that change? So use your resources. Use your coworker. Like I said, I steal half the stuff. The 3 chord song was because my 7th grade general music teachers had this packet that they had together, and I was like, that would be really cool for orchestra. Let's do it. Songs they already know. The band teacher put together the holiday packet, and I just took that from her and made it into what I wanted to do with my kids. So if your colleagues are like mine, they're doing phenomenal stuff with their students, and you can just take a look at it. How can I adapt what they're doing successfully for my kids? So it's pretty cool.
That's very cool.
Yeah. So how can people connect with you if they want to check out what you've been doing or your ensembles have been doing?
Yeah, sure. So my email is a great place if you have questions or want to see that, and put that in the description of the thing.
Yeah.
I put some clips on my school website, which is through College Area School District. Again, I'll send you that link so that you guys can share that. F-Flat Books is where our book is published. Marissa and Sarah talk about all the awesome things they're doing, which again, I steal from them all the time. Every time we present, I end up doing something new that they did. Actually, the arrangement thing was something Marissa did with her students, and I just took it and adapted it for middle school. So F-Flat Books, the Creative String Orchestra is the name of the book. It's an ebook. If you didn't get that from F-Flat Books. So it's a neat little handbook that you can download, and a lot of the ideas in here are fleshed out and talked about in more detail. Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for talking with us tonight. We are going to be interviewing Sarah next. So we talked to Marissa last time, and we've just really enjoyed all the things that you've had to share. So thank you so much for your time.
This is part 2 of a 3-part series on creativity and improvisation in ensembles. Please join us next time for part 3 with Sarah Gulish.
Thanks for joining us. Make sure you subscribe below.
And follow us on social media. I'm at Musical Teresa.
I'm Singing Finch 1.
And you can follow the hashtag #PassTheBatonBook.